Welcome to the Chase MedSearch podcast, the place where we dive deep into the medical device sales industry by discussing the current trends, timeless philosophies, and amazing experiences that shape our niche of the industry. Join me, Jordan Chase, on a guided tour as I speak with established sales leaders and professionals as they share stories that will help you get in, stay in, and thrive in your medical device sales career. Let's start the show. Welcome back to the Chase MedSearch podcast. Trying to keep a regular rhythm still of recording these sessions, and we've got a really good one today. We've got two guests that are rejoining us. We had an outstanding podcast episode, and I encourage everyone to go back and listen to it. But we've got Alexandra and Mike Cummins from DDI rejoining us for a second of a two-part, maybe a three-part podcast. And we're talking today about leadership development. And I'm going to steer the conversation a little selfishly toward my particular interest in developing sales leaders. So before we kick it off, let's have both our guests introduce themselves. Alexandra, why don't you go first?
Hi, Jordan. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. We are so excited to be back. A second time. Have you had anybody on twice before, or is this the first time?
It's been so rare. You have joined an elite crowd, let me tell you.
It is an honor, Well, thank you so much. Like Jordan mentioned, Alexandra Center. I'm a leadership advisor here at DDI. Really excited to chat with your audience today, Jordan, about leadership development and developing their either new hired leaders or those that are moving on up.
Great. Mike?
Thanks for having us back. First one was a little nerve-wracking for me. That was my first podcast ever, and I feel a lot more relaxed and comfortable in this one. So thanks for having us back. Name is Mike Cummins, been with DDI for probably I stopped counting after 25 years, let's just say that. For the first 3/4 of that, I was in a consulting role. So I was doing a lot of different work with big pharma in the medical device community. I did some work there and helped put success profiles together, competency models, doing training programs, selection, etc. For the last 5 years, I actually moved into a leadership role in sales, and my whole goal is to help sales folks become more consultative in their approach with our clients. So super happy to come back and happy to talk about this topic today.
Excellent. I really appreciate both of you coming back. I love having some of the best in the business on, and I've benefited so much from DDI myself over the years and the training I got early on and also the training I did with others, because you never learn anything as well when you train people. So it's just been a great organization to me in my career. Let me set the table for what we're going to talk about today, and kind of a tale of two different types of managers: inspirational leadership, excellent delegation and coaching, translating leadership decisions for their team into terms that make sense, helping their team see the bigger picture, establishing tremendous rhythm in sales and process discipline. These are things that good sales leaders do. Whereas micromanaging behaviors, venting on your team, lack of competence in assigning sales quotas, favoritism, inability to translate organizational directives to their employees, apathy, and more. All that's ammunition to recruiters like myself that know how to use vulnerabilities and exploit them to attract top talent to go elsewhere to new opportunities. It's been said that the frontline sales manager is arguably the most important position in any organization, and yet we see over and over again many organizations not really putting much intentionality into their development. Why do you two think that is?
Yeah, so how it works out with development is what we hear from most of our clients when they're first interested in investing in a development platform is there's no time. There's no time for this development. They have jobs to fulfill. We need to just run with it. Now, at the end of the day, organizations all have goals. And in order to reach organizational goals, they have to invest in their leaders, especially, Jordan, as you just mentioned, those frontline leaders. Those are the ones that are in front of those individual contributors each and every day. They're kind of that liaison between the individual contributor up to that mid-level, all the way up to the C-suite level leader. So it is so important to invest in the time for development with them. And at the end of the day, let's be honest, people do not leave their organizations, they leave their leaders. And if you're not going to start investing in developing your leaders, you're going to see retention going up. You're going to see a revolving door, and no organization wants to see that
Yeah,
internally.
absolutely.
And Elliot, I want to add to that because I think your no time and leaving leaders are great comments. And the second thing I would add is this: more often than not, I'm sure a lot of people listening would agree, you end up promoting a high performing individual contributor into a leader role. And often those are not the same skills that transfer to success at the next level. You've got to want to lead. You've got to want to coach and develop others. It's a different skill set. And so you asked a question about intentionality to develop. I think often they overlook the leap that one has to make behaviorally to be successful as a leader versus an individual contributor.
Hmm. Do you think it's just because they think, well, Jim Bob was successful in sales, so he's automatically going to be a successful sales leader?
That is a very common trend, especially in medical sales. I know that we touched on this a little bit last time. You just mentioned Jim Bob is number one in sales. He is crushing his goals. All the offices love him. That does not mean that he's going to be able to step up into a leadership position and all of those that he's managing are going to love him. There's a lot of development and training that needs to go on there so that you can gain insight into those competencies that are needed to make your individual contributors happy in their role. And also, just because you're a good contributor doesn't mean you're going to be a good coach.
Yeah. And I know we're going to get into how DDI helps organizations get specific about the competencies that are needed for success in their organizational context. But for anyone out here listening, there are some common things that people need to appreciate and develop when they move from an individual contributor into a manager role that are just kind of universal rules, if you will. What are a few of those?
Jordan, when you say universal rules, I want to make sure I'm syncing with you. I'm thinking about the behaviors that are different at the next level. Is that what you mean by that question?
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. Yep.
Okay. So it's interesting whether you're talking about medical device, pharma, or banking IT. When you move into that frontline leader role, there are a couple behaviors that I can rattle off right now that in my 20 plus years have been consistent behaviors that are needed for success at the front line.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just name a few. Probably the number one for me is delegation. As an individual contributor, you don't have the opportunity to delegate things to others. You're the one that is being delegated to. Yet as a leader, you can't do everything yourself. Your role is to make sure that you are empowering others to drive the behaviors you need for success. And so when I build selection systems out for organizations, I often don't select for delegation because most individual contributors need training in that. That is a core developable frontline leader skill that is part of almost every success profile or competency model that I've created in my career. A couple others off the top of my head are coaching, planning and organizing, customer focus, and just a different level of communication, a higher level of professionalism in the way you communicate.
Terrific. Alexandra, anything to add there?
Yeah, and going off of what Mike just mentioned, because that's absolutely correct. And also on top of that, I would say, especially when looking at that med sales audience, you need to build trust. You need to be able to address that poor performance. I know we've discussed those ride-alongs in our past recording, and that's where, now that you're in that frontline leadership role, how are you going to address that poor performance? If they went into an office and you feel like there's some improvement that's needed there, how are you going to coach your individual contributor?
Yeah. Mike, you started with delegation, and I agree, just as a business owner myself. And as we've grown and had some success and have been able to add resources to our team, this is a frequent topic of discussion. Delegation is hard. It's hard for someone that's been successful as an individual contributor to now release control over activities and discrete actions that they can do that they know lead to immediate success and have led to immediate success in the past. And you just end up rolling up your sleeves and doing it yourself. And how many of us have known sales managers that are incredibly frustrated by their new job because they are now, instead of managing one sales territory, they're now managing 5, and they don't know how to let go. Is that why delegation is so hard? Or I'm trying to get to the root of it for myself.
So my opinion is similar to what you're saying. It's hard to let go because the reality is that individual got promoted into the role because they know their job so well. And then it's probably faster and easier for he or she to do the task themselves because they know how to do it. it's hard to let go of that and give it to somebody else to create the right performance expectations to ensure that he or she is there to provide support without removing the task ownership from the individual and staying in the loop. That actually can take more time.
Hmm.
But you doing it yourself, you're no longer a coach, you're no longer a leader. You're back to being an individual contributor. So there lies the rub and the challenge to get people comfortable to give up tasks, but yet still stay close to them to make sure they're being executed properly.
Right. Hmm. Excellent. Well, there are organizations that want to learn to do this well. They focus on it, and there are organizations correspondingly that help them do it well. DDI is one of those organizations. How do you begin your process with an organization that says, hey, we want to up our game in this? We know it's important instinctively, we know it. How do you begin to work with an organization?
Great question, Jordan. So, whenever a client comes to us and is having interest in development, we're going to walk them through our subscription method to leadership development. And with this subscription, we are going to help your organization make development a way of work. Now, what we mean by that is every day, your leaders are going to be faced with new challenges. There's going to be those that are expected, those that are unexpected. So, for example, going into a new role, everybody's going to need those core, those soft skills that we kind of just addressed a second ago. Then also, what happens if there is a sudden change? So, for instance, a merger or your organization is acquired by a bigger umbrella organization. These are all more of those unexpected changes that you need to know how to address head on. So therefore, we're making development a way of work within the organizations by unleashing our line of products to these clients. So what I mean by these line of products, we're talking about courses for those frontline and mid-level leaders. We're talking about micro courses. We're talking about sustainability tools, measurements, pretty much everything under the sun that we can do in order to develop these particular leaders on certain competencies that are needed to be successful within this position and how to address individual contributor issues, any issues that come up in the workplace. We're going to be able to assist with that through our subscription.
Okay.
Jordan, I want to add to what Alexandra just said and put maybe a little bit of a real world spin to something. And that is, let's take the competency of delegation we talked about a second ago. When I think about DDI's course in delegation, we're exposing these folks into what does that look like? The whole point here is let's have a facilitator show what it looks like to be the expert, to give up that, to stay close to it, to provide the right kind of support. We model what positive behavior looks like. We then break down those behaviors and kind of explain to the individual what it's going to take to learn and develop that skill. Then, most importantly, we go through a bunch of different little skill practices where the facilitator can then observe and provide real-time feedback to the individuals around, hey, you did a really nice job of letting go of that in that quick 15-minute skill practice, but you didn't do anything to keep yourself in the loop afterwards. You didn't do anything to follow up. Make sure you remember that one key action in the next time you do delegation. So they get real-time feedback. And then we close, and the opportunity then is there to say, how are you now going to practice this on the job? DDI's big statement here is behavior change won't happen in the classroom. It'll happen on the job. But the classroom is the place where you can practice it and get comfortable with it. So then you're out on the job, you can then exercise that new behavior and hone it over time.
Mm-hmm. Are these online courses, online modules?
So we offer them in a few different modalities. So to Mike's point, we can definitely do an in-person classroom where it's most of our courses, if done in an in-person or a virtual facilitation, so over your Teams or Zoom, they're usually about 3 hours long. Now, we also do offer them in the online modality, and then they're only about an hour. But to Mike's point that he just made, it's really important to involve those skills practices, which it can really be done in that in-person or virtual classroom, because you're not going to master a skill overnight. Practice makes perfect. It's going to take getting some of that feedback, which is crucial in order to improve any sort of skill. So by getting either somebody facilitator certified internally, or you can have DDI come in and do the facilitation for you, you're really going to build that trust with whoever is your facilitator. You're going to get to practice, get some feedback, and really put it into play.
hmm Keeping the audience in mind here, if I'm a sales manager driving around in, I don't know, Arkansas somewhere, Little Rock, and I hear this podcast and I think, my organization really doesn't invest in this, but I want to invest in this for myself professionally. I want to get better at delegation. I want to get better at, being an inspirational leader. Can they one off this, or does it need to be a big organizational purchase with you guys? Do you have individual subscribers?
So this is not something that we one off
Okay.
because we really want the organization to be all in on this.
Mhm.
Because for a leader to improve, we want that positive reinforcement there with the organization. We want that company buy-in because if they are having your back on this, then you're going to be able to see the positive behavior changes. So through the subscription, you're going to be given not only all of these tools that we just explained, but you're also going to be getting resources as well as a team from DDI that's going to help you to improve on these changes as they move forward. So through the subscription, you're also going to receive a strategic learning team that can help listen to your organizational goals and then help these leaders develop based on these goals for the organization.
Got it. Mike, anything to add there?
Yeah, I'll throw this in. Back to your question, Jordan. Why don't you allow individual one-offs? There's a bunch of research out there, and I won't bore people with it too much, but the bottom line is this. The leader of the learner is key in having the overall behavior have stickiness and sustainability within your organization. So it's DDI's opinion, and the research would say it's got to be an organizational initiative rallied around some red thread of change that's needed. I'm trying to create a coaching culture. I'm trying to increase engagement. I'm trying to lower turnover, whatever that may be. How is the leader of the learner involved? What is the learner learning? And then how do I then drive those behaviors after the fact? Without that involvement, I think you're wasting your money on a one-off. And so it's DDI's point of view that says, let's talk to the organization. Let's figure out what the shift in behavior is needed. And let's build out a program that is involving all the right folks internally to help drive the behavior. And then we want to measure it too. So at the very end, let's say we're going to do a 6-month training program around delegation and communication. I want to put in the right kind of measurement afterwards that says, yes, we moved the needle, we improved these behaviors, and here's how, and show that back to a user buyer or an economic buyer within the organization.
Makes sense. Yeah. In my experience, the best sales managers seek out their own development, frequently. And if they're not getting it, they ask for it. And if they don't get it, ultimately, sometimes they move on because they really want to keep growing professionally and adding to their competence in this area. What happens if an organization isn't constantly working at developing their sales leaders?
Well, and that's where, as we mentioned earlier, you're going to start to see that revolving door.
Mhm.
You're going to see leaders wanting to leave. It's almost a domino effect. And once somebody leaves, others start catching wind of it. They start feeling that pressure, and it continues to happen. Now, it's interesting because sometimes whenever I talk to a client, they just immediately assume that their leaders are not going to want to invest the time in this development. They are too busy. Nobody has time for this. And Jordan, it's so interesting when these clients get going because they really don't see that at all. A lot of leaders are so excited to be involved in this sort of development, knowing that your organization is investing in you and your future with them is huge. Whenever we have clients reach out to us and say that they have been having that revolving door happening, everyone's under stress, there's a lot of anxiety going on, you would be so shocked to see how excited these leaders are to know that they're going to get some investment in themselves. And it kind of adds a little bit of a job security for them because it shows them, we see what you're doing, we appreciate what you're doing, and we want to invest in your future with us.
Yeah.
Real world example, I think, to maybe even put some color to what Alexandra just said. We have a course at DDI called Communication Connect Through Conversations. It's really ideally focused for frontline leaders to communicate better. And it can be broken down into things like just asking more questions, showing empathy, providing self-esteem, showing involvement in conversations, etc. I've taken that course and we've delivered it to frontline leaders with phenomenal success. But we've also taken that same frontline course and elevated it to mid and senior level leaders where we've had comments back from the group saying, I've been in this role for 10 years. I wish I would have had this blueprint years ago.
Hmm.
So some of the most simplistic behaviors like empathy and esteem can be applicable at multiple levels within an organization. It just comes down to, have you had the opportunity and been exposed to this type of training in the past?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's because it's happened to me too. It's sort of this rueful sort of, "Oh, I wish I would have had it because I've been doing this for 10 years or 15 years, and now it's almost like a new toy. I've got a new behavior that I can implement that will get results, and I'll feel good about implementing it and the way in which I'm doing it because I've got clarity that this is a good, legitimate way to handle this business problem or deal with this conversation or whatever it is." And you just think about all those missed opportunities over the years. And when you have that sort of experience, you want to, man, how can I accelerate this for other people so they don't have to have gone through what I went through the last 10 years?
I love that comment. I think that speaks to the ideally stickiness of the leadership development solutions that we have. And on top of that, I'd also say that when you have that same feeling because of what you've learned and how you've grown as a leader, if you can also take a step back and say, we've decreased turnover by 10%, we've increased engagement by 15%. We now have a clear coaching culture built within this organization, and you can see how your role is linked back to the growth of your organization.
Hmm.
That's a 1 + 1 = 3 sort of solution.
Yeah. It's nice because also as organizations develop competency in this, it can become part of their identity, right? And it's attractive to have clarity and know who you are and what you're about and wear that kind of as an organizational badge and say, you know what, we over here as part of our pitch, if you will, to people that want to join the organization or keep them there, we're good at this stuff. We work hard at it. No one's ever going to be perfect, but we're striving, and this is something that we care a lot about and invest in, and that we do well. And I think that can be part of a compelling kind of attractiveness to the external talent market to say, those people are about that particular aspect of this.
Well, and one thing I would say there too, Jordan, is having everybody speaking the same language. You go
Mhm.
to a company's website and you see their motto, you see their company goals, and what are they actually doing to accomplish that? I mean, personally, I know I've worked for organizations before where I talk to one leader and they tell me one thing, and then I talk to another and they're going to tell me something completely different.
Yeah.
And they're both just, speaking out of thin air, whatever comes to mind. If we can take a step back and get every leader on the same page, speaking the exact same language, you're going to get the same communication from each of them as it comes to telling them what to do, what needs to be done. That is crucial for an organization. You want to make sure that everybody's aligned. And as I mentioned, everybody's speaking that same
Mhm.
language. That is really, really important.
It, to build upon that again, Jordan, to Alexander's point, I really like what you're saying there in terms of one language. This is why the one-off isn't ideal, where we can come in and say, here are the 3 things this organization is trying to improve upon over the next 6 months to a year. And if I can show you from the front line, mid-level, and senior leadership, the development that I'm getting is helping drive that business forward, everybody wins.
Yeah. Yeah. Organizations are collections of individuals, and yet that organization eventually begins to form its own identity, and each has its own sort of unique culture and development needs. When you start working with an organization, how do you get to the point where you can drive development content that's specific to their context, to their needs? So now we're moving away from kind of the general things that everybody needs to unique organizational needs in terms of management development or sales man. I want to stay focused on sales management because that's really the audience here. But within that, they all have their own unique culture. How do you get to the point where you can tailor things for them to their context?
And Jordan, you are spot on there. Every single organization has different needs. They are never going to be one and the same. And it's going to be really specific to every single organization that we talk to. So once we have an organization that has invested in this DDI subscription for development, I mentioned earlier that you're going to receive a strategic learning team. So what that consists of is a leadership advisor. You're going to receive a project manager that's going to make sure that we're internally launching on time. We're making sure that, You've got the communication tools. You're going to receive all the best practices. But then the key here, you're going to get a consultant. And that consultant is going to put on their consultative hat and talk to you about the ins and outs of the organization. They're going to talk to you about the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, the ugly, so we can help address those specific needs for your company. So how that works out with the strategic learning team, before you even launch a subscription, we're going to have 3 meetings. And in meeting 1, your consultant is going to come in and ask all these questions. I always joke that meeting 1 with the strategic learning team, we're almost going to have a therapy session. I want you to come with an open mindset and feel free to talk to us about anything that's going on internally. Now, what I mean by that is everything that is said is confidential. It stays between the strategic learning team and those from your organization that come on. And why are you investing in this? What's the behavior change that you're wanting to see out of this? So then what we can do is go back and craft together some journeys that you can put in place that are going to change these behaviors. And this is where I want Mike to somewhat step in for a little bit, because he was a consultant at DDI for so long, and he can help touch on a little bit of what that consultant's going to do in meeting 1 to help address your specific organizational needs.
Yeah, see if I can paint a picture here too, Alexandra. It's really, to your point, it's about asking questions to understand where's the business focused. It's things like, and I'm going to rattle off a couple of generic ideas, Jordan, and then we'll dive into some. Are you currently trying to build out a brand new organization because you're in growth mode? Are you currently trying to control or reduce operating costs? Are you currently trying to seek out partners to grow your business? Or is it bottom line around trying to churn out more product innovation? Each one of those areas are different, what DDI would call a business driver, things to focus your business on moving forward. So to go underneath that hood a little bit, if you're trying to reduce or control operating costs, then that's going to be more around decision-making, financial acumen, etc. Versus if you're trying to drive product innovation, that's going to be about entrepreneurship and innovation behaviors. And so understanding where the business is headed and what are the behaviors needed from the top of the house all the way down to a frontline leader or even an individual contributor, the behaviors they need to be successful to help drive that overall initiative. And it's different because if I'm truly in a growth mode and I'm trying to acquire new businesses, that's a different set of behaviors versus I need to control and reduce operating costs and drive profitable growth within my company. So understanding where your business is headed for the next, let's say 12 to 18 months, then drives the type of development journeys that DDI would build out for you at your frontline, mid-level, and senior leader roles.
Okay. So really a marriage of or alignment of their business goals, business drivers, and then kind of applying that filter to the organizational context and trying to develop managers to meet the challenges that the organization has.
I love what you just said. It's a marriage. It's not a one size fits all. It's understanding where the business is headed and alignment to the behaviors and driving that through training and development. Great summary.
And keep in mind too, all of our courses and all of our content aligns back to those competencies. So once we figure out which competencies your leaders are really needed to be developed on, that's when your consultant can really run with it and help look into what courses are going to align with the competencies we're looking at. It's one of those things where a lot of this can sound overwhelming, but we're going to do some of that heavy lifting for the organizations to make sure that it is a success and that you don't feel like you're a fish underwater.
The last time we were together, we talked about assessments for interviewing, right? We talked a lot about that. And we began to talk toward the end of that conversation about the use of those assessments for other purposes, right? So is there an assessment component with this now where you've got, organizational managers and you're trying to create this great alignment between organizational goals and build competencies to take you there? How much do assessments play in this phase of the game?
Yeah. So one thing that is really awesome about the DDI subscription is that we're going to go ahead and hand you a subscription for your participants right off the bat. So this is going to be our My Pathway self-assessment. And what My Pathway does is you're going to have your leaders go in and take this 10 to 20 minute assessment based on competencies. So these competencies are going to be those that are that we see most in that frontline leader. So your leaders are going to go in, take this assessment, and what we can do with this assessment and the results that we see out of it is help curate these learning journeys or the development moving forward. So it's going to help tell your leaders which competencies they're confident in, which ones they're less confident in, and help to give them some content that they can take on their own to develop these competencies. And from there too, your team is going to be able to see the organization's results as a whole and what we might need to take back and suggest for the facilitators to do some courses on.
What size organizations do you target for this type of work? I mean, I work with a lot of startups where, they might have, some of them might have 4 salespeople, some of them might have 60, but they're not typically all that large. And then there are a few clients I have that are larger. What size organization is the sweet spot, or maybe the smallest organization that you would recommend this kind of work for?
Well, and that's such a funny remark, Jordan, because truly we work with the same audiences. So I have some clients that truly have 30 people within the entire organization. They're a smaller mom and pop, and they're just getting things going, but who knows where they're going to be in 5 years. They are growing like crazy, and we're helping them every step of the way. We also, as we had teased last time, we work with a lot of the Fortune 500 companies. We have some really, really big name organizations that have a lot of employees. Now, that just means their development stages might look a little bit different, but that doesn't mean that we can't assist a small organization just as much as we can assist a huge organization.
Got it. Mike?
I love everything that Alexandra said. I'm going to go back, I think, one step and talk about another assessment tool within the DDI funnel. Because you asked a question about how people use assessments. And Alexandra did a nice job of explaining how we have this built-in self-assessment that individual contributors or frontline leaders can take to help drive their development early on. But I'm also a big fan of an organization's engagement survey that comes back and says, these are the things that we're struggling in. We've seen 360s be a nice tool to help triangulate the data to say, as an organization, when I look at all the top of the house 360s, we are struggling in these 2 or 3 areas. We need to drive development around that. Assessments can be a really good, solid, objective data point to help drive the development content, in addition to the work that Alexandra explained in terms of us going in early on as a consultant and focusing on the business drivers. If I have an organization that both wants to understand from meeting number 1 and us to talk through where their business is headed, and they're willing to share with me either any in-house diagnostic or willing to go through some type of an assessment, those 2 data points are sort of like almost like getting you right down to the detail of what we really need to focus on. So I'm a big fan of assessments on the front end of a learning path to make sure that we are on the right path, but it's not required. I think we can do a decent job by linking back to the business itself and creating a learning path, but assessments are an awesome add-on that I've seen best-in-class organizations put into place. And I hope I answered the question there. I'm not sure if I went off on a different tangent or not.
No, that's good. That's good. I think something Alexandra mentioned earlier that I like too is there's someone superintending this process. You'll see organizations that they kind of create a concoction of different things. Like they might do an assessment from one organization and, they're all about the assessment for a while. And then, then there's something else that they come in and they bring in a speaker and, they talk about execution or something like that. And then they're all about that, and it's just, there's never really sort of a cohesive focus that ties in with their vision. They just want to do a bunch of things. And, there's some good that can come of that for sure. But I think what Alexandra mentioned is that you're assigned someone to kind of Sherpa this process along and guide you. And they've got their eye on the ball so that these things are all sort of fitting together nicely as you go through this process.
That is correct. And I have 2 scenarios I want to mention based off of that. When it comes to these smaller clients, I have many that come to me and it's one person spearheading this. And that is a lot for one person to take on. They are still doing their own job within the HR team, but then now they're having to spearhead this development. And it can be a lot for one person to do. They're a little overwhelmed. Where do I even start? How do I stay within this time frame that I've been given? That's where this team can really help them and make sure that they're staying on time. We're getting them the journeys they need. We can discuss different cohorts, all of that. But then also when we're talking about these big organizations, that can be a lot of people's opinions. That can be a lot of people coming to the table with different ideas. We can help get everyone on that same page. Let's all get to a decision, and we're going to move forward with what we've crafted together.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk what success looks like. Because if I'm sitting here and, if I'm in charge of the HR department, or if I'm the sales leader or whoever, and I'm thinking about as someone goes through this process with you guys, what does great look like working with you guys, and kind of how soon can we get to that point?
Well, and you want to see your return on investment at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
When your organizations have a revolving door, it's going to be expensive to rehire these leaders and train them and develop them to get them up to speed. We're seeing a lot of quiet quitting these days with younger generations, and having to start from scratch and all over again, it's going to cost organizations a lot of money. So when they are investing in their current leaders and developing them, they're going to actually see some cost savings down the line. Now, when it comes to the ROI and when you're going to start to see it, we want them to start seeing it after the first session or at the first courses that they're taking. It's all about that behavior changes. And it's one of those where it should be happening ongoing. What were some of the feedbacks that they were giving after the courses were done? Were they handling scenarios a little bit differently in the workplace? Were they speaking better with their individual contributors and communicating, anything that needs to be addressed in the workplace? This is behavior changes that should be going as they continue to develop. Now, we do offer some measurement down the line as they continue to go through these courses. And so that can help us gauge the user measurements. How's it going in the different courses? That's what your strategic learning team is going to be discussing internally during your quarterly business reviews. So we mentioned this strategic learning team is going to help you launch the program. Now, what are we going to do after we launch? We are not just a launch team. We're actually going to be somewhat holding your hands throughout this entire development. So every quarter, that same strategic learning team is going to meet with the leaders from the organization. And we're going to talk about any data, any measurements. We want to talk about any pros and cons that are going on with the development. You never have to be married to the initial journeys that we proposed. If something has come up and we need to make some adjustments, we can always do that. And so we're going to be discussing any of the ROI within the quarterly business reviews.
Great. Mike?
Yes. So this is where the consultant in me comes out a little bit. And the answer is, well, it depends. So let's take two different scenarios. One is, let's say that you've got high turnover in the organization and you think you have the wrong leaders in place. I don't think that's a 3-month, 6-month fix. I think you've got to do some kind of a diagnostic to figure out where the pain point is. And you might have to focus on some more complex behaviors like building trust and decision making. And those aren't going to just flip a switch and change over time. That's going to be practice and time to develop those behaviors. Versus, I'm in growth mode right now. We're going to hire 30 new leaders this year because we're growing so fast and they don't have any experience whatsoever. And I want to get them some of the core blocking and tackling of leadership like coaching, communication, and delegation. I think you can put those folks through some focus, course content, practice, get feedback, and you can start to see the needle moved on that quite quickly. So the answer to your question really is, what's the problem we're trying to solve for? And what's the baseline of what I've got right now? And how much do I have to move the needle? And I think that really then drives how fast we can see behavior change happen in an organization.
That's great. Well, obviously you two are steeped in this, highly competent in this. And if anyone were interested in getting in touch with you, how could they do that?
Yes. And truly, it excites me having these conversations and discussing with organizations how we can help. I am happy to help any organization under the sun as it comes to a smaller group all the way up to a huge organization. We have the tools to assist. So if anybody's interested, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Alexandra Center, or shoot me an email, alexandra.center@ddiworld.com.
Outstanding. Well, thank you both for being on. I never get tired of this. I can always talk about this all day long. Because it's like one of those things that it's not a hard measurement, meaning like it's not a financial measurement, at least on the surface, having competent managers. It's one of those things, it's a soft measurement, but it's crucial to the success of the whole enterprise. And it's almost like a hidden thing that everybody knows about and talks about, but it's hard to put a finger on and quantify. And it's even harder, I think, for people to figure out how to move the needle with this group of individuals, but they're so important. I said it earlier, I think it's the most important job in the whole organization.
You spoke like a true DDI consultant with that last statement, but I am going to change one statement that you said there.
Yeah.
And that is it's hard to quantify. And I think that's a misnomer. I think if you partner up with the right organization, you should be able to show the ROI on your results, that we did move the needle, we improved on these behaviors. That to me is very, very doable.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a good corrective. I like that because you're right. It is measurable, especially if you start taking these things seriously and start measuring it from the beginning of where you're at. Establish measurements everybody agrees on. If we could improve these things, we've improved the organization. At the end of the process, you say, we moved the needle. I mean, that's going to lead to organizational success. And especially, I think about organizations where every position matters, right? The smaller you are, the more crucial every single role is. And if you can set it up right to start with from the very foundation of the organization, you probably will reap the benefits that much faster.
Yeah, well said again. And I'll say this, of all the organizations I work with, sales leadership is probably the most fun because I think it's the most easily measurable. Open position or what that leader has done to help grow their folks. We've got great sales metrics that you can say, I've decreased turnover, I've increased revenue per rep, et cetera. It's a fun industry to show ROI in for sure.
Terrific. Well, I'd love to have you both back.
Hey, Jordan, if we do come back, I want to talk assessments maybe.
Okay.
And then you got to start thinking about like Saturday Night Live where we can get like a 3-timer jacket or something like that. That might be a good idea.
Absolutely. We'll figure that out. That's easy.
Right.
We'll figure that out for sure.
Yes. We're just trying to be the dream team.
Thank you both again.
Thank you, Jordan.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you for joining us on the Chase MedSearch podcast. I hope that you gained some helpful insight from today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes and give us a like on your favorite streaming platform. It really helps grow our audience. For more information on Chase MedSearch, visit our website at chasemedsearch.com. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, I'm Jordan Chase, and this has been the Chase MedSearch podcast.